So now, which only makes sense, what we're doing is we're getting involved in the book side of things. Yeah, we're a music station, but we do a lot of other things as well. McNally Robinson has long been known for their amazing selection of books. So what we're doing is we're launching a new segment which is going to take place first Friday of every month at 8:30. Well, I know it's not the first Friday, but anyway, from here on in, the first Friday, every Friday morning at 8:30, first Friday of the month, we'll be launching a segment called What to Read. And as part of that segment, we have we've arranged with the co-owner, Chris Hall from McNally Robinson Booksellers, to come in and talk about some of the amazing books that they'll be offering up for the month. Sort of coincides with their bi-monthly newsletter called The Bookseller. So Chris is in the studio this morning. Morning, Chris.
Hi, Michael.
Hey.
Nice to see you again.
Sorry, we got totally sidetracked off the air talking about each other's lives because we haven't seen each other for a little while. Really nice to have you here. You know?
Thank you.
And congratulations. You've taken over from Holly and Paul a few years ago already. So this is kind of, you've been doing that. You're fully immersed in, co-owning the bookstore along with Lori Baker. So a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to chatting about books. So before we get into talking about some of the books from the bookseller, you told me off air about something really exciting, and we got the scoop on it. Well, tell us about that right now.
Right. Yeah, well, we got some papers signed just in time to get it in our most recent newsletter. So there's a bit of a line in there about it. But yeah, we're gonna in the planning stages of opening a store in the Forks. It'll be very small, about 850 square feet or so, which is tiny by our standards.
Yeah, it's one corner of your bookstore.
It is. It's the size of our community classroom, actually.
Okay.
So it is. We'd be able to fill it 20 times over. But it'll end up being kind of the best of, newest of. Feature things, move new product through. It'll be there one visit. Next time you visit, it might not be there. Just a way to really showcase what we do and get in front of a lot of people, we hope.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. It's very exciting news. So it's one more thing on top of everything else you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Opening a new store. Yeah.
I was getting a little bored. So,
I guess so. Yeah, with 2 kids at home and a house and all that kind of stuff. You're getting bored with all that stuff. So where's it going to be located?
It's going to be upstairs in the main terminal. So up with the retail area, just above what they're calling the Common, which is where you get your beer and wine, and Fools and Horses has a coffee place on the other side. So we'll just be up from that. Kind of when you get to the top of the elevator, you'll see us.
Very nice. Well, congratulations. That's exciting news. So that's coming probably next year or so, beginning of next year.
Yeah, the reality of construction and so on. We were hoping for late fall, and it may still happen. We can get it open before Christmas, but wouldn't be surprised if it slips into early January. But early January should be pretty realistic.
Cool. And then I guess Paul's not going to be working on it. He normally
No,
would
exactly. We had to
Paul
find
McNally,
someone else.
the former owner, would usually get the hammer and nails out and do it himself. Right. So you had to hire somebody this time.
Somebody else to build the bookshelves. I know. Right. It's not something I signed on to do. So,
people may or may not be aware. I mean, people know the store, McNally Robinson Booksellers. Tell us a little bit about this bi-monthly newsletter you guys have called The Bookseller.
It's called The Bookseller. Yeah, it's been going for a long time, probably 15 plus years. Yeah. Shortly after the big store on Grant Avenue opened, and it's morphed a little bit. But it's a kind of the main or key way that we can market new books. We can market our events, and as we've diversified into non-book items, we've been able to feature that, improving our photography and so on. So it's a real showcase of the newest books and the newest titles and what's going on in our store and our community. There's a community page that we can mention things, some of our community partners, and it's a operation unto itself within our company. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you've chosen a number of books from The Bookseller that you want to feature this month, and we'll do more in October. So let's just dig right into them.
Okay.
So you've got 4, 5, 6 books. We'll see what we've time to get for. What are you going to start out with? What's one of the hottest books to come out this month that you think is?
Well, I thought I would start with one of my favorite authors. Why not? Zadie Smith has the book came out last year in hardcover. It's just coming out in paperback. It's called Swing Time, and I'll read anything Zadie Smith writes. If she's got an essay, I read it, and I don't follow her quite on social media, but I'm sure I would be reading her tweets if she she was doing such a thing. her books just have a life to them. There's a mishmash of things. So it's not a straightforward message or anything. It's just a lot of conversation and a lot of life. So this one is about two young girls in London, two brown girls, as the narrator describes them, and they both are into dance. Swing Time, the title, comes from a movie with Fred Astaire, and so they're but only one of them, not the narrator, her friend Tracy, is the only one with any talent for dancing. The narrator has flat feet, and she can sing a little, but she's a little bit excluded from
tap
dance.
dancers, correct?
That's
dancers?
tap dancing, yeah.
That's tap dancing.
Yeah, they're doing all kinds of dancing, these girls at least. But so as she grows older, she gets involved with a pop singer who is quite likely modeled on Madonna by the sounds of it, who gets ambitious in Africa and wants to open schools and ends up adopting a young African girl. So that part of the story sounds kind of familiar.
And there's lots of music interwoven, I believe,
absolutely.
too. I was reading
There's lots
about
of
that.
music. There's lots of, it's, I like her because she's so smart. That's why I'll read everything. She just makes you think, and her novels do too, but they're like, the ideas don't take over. They're there, and you could probably analyze it in terms of class or race or things if you really wanted to. But the ideas just are in real life in her books, and I really like that combination.
So she's a fiction writer.
Fiction writer.
She's an award-winning fiction writer. In
Absolutely.
fact, what was her first novel she won an award?
White Teeth was the first
Teeth.
one. Yeah, that came on. I think she was like 24 or something when that came out. Yeah, she writes a lot of nonfiction though too, and it's very, very, very good nonfiction. Yeah, writes about all kinds of things.
Yeah, I've been reading lots about that one online. That was a huge release. That's right.
Absolutely.
And now it's in softcover, so it'll get even a wider audience.
Yeah, no, she's one of the big authors for sure.
So from Zadie Smith, what's the next one?
Next one I was going to talk to as our author of the month for September is Adam Gopnik. If you read The New Yorker, you don't need me to introduce you to Adam Gopnik. He's one of their main writers, and again, back to you're going to catch on over these segments that I like ideas. So he's another guy that he's almost effortlessly ranges from ideas and through history and art and all kinds of cultural elements that he can bring in. And you hear him on the radio, and he's just got so much knowledge at his disposal. So this book is, he writes nonfiction. This book is called At the Stranger's Gate, his new one, that is. And it's about he and his wife, I think he was born in Philadelphia, but he grew up in Montreal, and he and his wife moved from Montreal to New York in their early 20s in 1980 or something like that. And it's just their arrival and their struggles to try to make a life in the cultural world of New York. They tells the story of their first apartment, which is literally 9 by 11 feet. He repeats that several times.
9 by 11 feet.
That's where they lived for like 3 years. They lived in what they call the Blue Room.
Can you even get a bed into a 9 by 11 feet? I don't know.
It's funny. He mentions it, I think, 4 or 5 times, and because he's quite right. We don't believe him. But no, he insists that this is where they lived for the first few years. So,
and I've heard that this could even be considered his best book. I read that online somewhere that it could be.
It could be. He gets better and better. His first book was called Paris to the Moon. I guess he and his wife and their 2 kids, I believe, moved to Paris for a year for his work with the New Yorker, and so it was their experience there. That's probably 10 plus years ago now that he wrote that. But I remember that one coming out and got a lot of attention. A lot of people, lived vicariously through that book, I think, about imagining themselves moving to Paris for a year. But yeah, he's the culture in all of its essence. That's what flows through his books. So
that's kind of a neat connection. Spent some time in Canada, but it's all about his time in the States. So
he wrote a book a few years. He did the Massey lectures, CBC's Massey lectures, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, and on winter. And so it's 5 chapters on 5 lectures at the time of about winter, and so it's fascinating too. About really spins winter positively, and it's a good thing for Canadians to read.
Absolutely, I could read. I've never read that one. Maybe I should read that because I'm not a big fan of winter.
Pull it out in January.
Do you?
Absolutely,
just to remind yourself.
Great time to read that book.
I just wanted to mention that I'm in conversation now with Chris Hall. He's the co-owner of McNally Robinson Booksellers. And we're launching a new segment today called What to Read. So he's chosen a number of titles from their bi-monthly newsletter called The Bookseller, and we're highlighting those for you to just to get a better idea of some of the books that they're going to be offering this month. So from Adam Gopnik, from Adam Gopnik, what's the next one we got there?
The next one we have is a local writer, Mayera Cook. Her new novel is called Once More with Feeling. Mayera is a poet and novelist now. It's her third novel. And this one is...
fiction, correct?
Fiction, yes.
Yeah.
And this one is takes place in an unnamed prairie city, but the prairie city that's bisected by railway lines and rivers and connected by boulevards and back alleys. So does that sound familiar?
Maybe.
So, quite clearly set at where we live. But another book just full of life. It's full of conversation, full of people, real people. And what I find fascinating about this book is it's maybe the first 100 pages or so. There's a real light tone to it. It's really humorous and dare I say frivolous almost. But as the book goes on, it becomes a little bit more serious. I mean, there's still jokes flying and lots of lighthearted conversation, but it's almost like she's like at the beginning of the book, the characters are using humor to almost avoid things. Like there's dark things happening, real life is happening, but you kind of distance yourself from it with humor, and our humor can be used that way. And that seems to be the characters are just not really engaging in their lives, but it kind of life catches up with them as the book moves on. The tone of the book changes. You start to get a little bit more emotionally involved in the book, and I find it fascinating that books aren't just about what happens next. They're a really well-written book, kind of in the hands of a skilled writer. They become more than that, and with the tricks of the trade and the craft of writing is part of doing that lure you in and make you care about the people. And it's she's pulled off a good book here.
Go ahead.
She won the McNally Robinson Book of the Year for her last book, on House on Sugarbush Road was what it was called. So very award-winning poet, but then now, an award-winning novelist too, the last one.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you guys are sort of experts in, and you excel at, are local authors, local writers. Whenever you look at the top of the fiction, nonfiction, 9 times out of 10, it's a local author up there, because with the book launches and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Local writers are big supporters of us, and so we always like to make sure we're paying back and support them as well as we can. Mayer's going to have a event in our store actually on October 2nd, Monday. Conversation with the Free Press's Alison Gilmore. So, if you want to come and meet her and get your book signed, she's fun.
Well, just about every night of the week there's an event, at least
there
one
is.
Or two events. I know all about
this time of year.
This time of year for sure. Yeah. So from local we move to the Tobacconist. Is that the next one?
No, Runaway Wives and Rogue Feminists is where I was going to go next. That's somewhat local. Margot Goodhand used to be the an editor at the Winnipeg Free Press. She's moved on. I think she's in Edmonton now. But she's written this book. It's about I guess back in the early 70s, 60s and 70s. Think of those times as kind of an enlightened time, but the violence against women was widespread. I mean, and women at the time had nowhere to go. They had nowhere to escape the abuse or violence of abusive husbands. And so suddenly in 1973. 5 shelters for women who needed somewhere to go and somewhere to escape to opened across Canada. And what I find interesting and what Margot Goodhand points out is these 5 sites within Canada arose independently of each other. They didn't know each other. They didn't know this was happening, but they all came along at exactly the same time, more or less, within the same year anyway, which clearly was, I guess, or seems at least in retrospect, a sign that this was needed. And so now there's 600 of these spaces, safe spaces where women can go. Certainly violence against women has not gone away. And so she tells a story of the runaway wives and then the rogue feminists who with very little public support set these places up and fought and tried to do what they could to protect women from this abuse.
So it's one of those historical moments that not a lot of people know about, but that's huge.
Yeah,
it was hugely.
Absolutely. There was an excerpt in the Free Press the other day, and it gets down into the stories of individuals, and that's always
fascinating.
It is, yeah. It's a great way to tell history, not dates and so on, but actually talking to people who were there and did it, and why, what their motivations were, what their stories are.
So that's Runaway Wives and Rogue Feminists by Margot Goodhand. Next is The Tobacconist, Robert Seethaler. Yeah, he's a Viennese, or Austrian. I think he's from Vienna, but an author. And he came across my radar. He was on the Impact Dublin shortlist last year. The Impact Dublin is one of the international book prizes, and I always pay attention to it. One of the richest. I believe it is. The richest, yes. I think. Is it? Okay. I've found some great authors reading shortlists of major book prizes. If you aren't interested in what the winner wrote, it doesn't matter. Read something from these shortlists. You can discover great things. So he got on that for a book called Whole Life, and this is the follow-up, or at least the next book translated, called The Tobacconist. And it's a little bit like how I was describing Mayera Cook's book. That it starts off. There's a young, naive Franz Hukela who comes from the countryside and comes to Vienna, the big city, to make his fortune. And it's told. It reads like a fairy tale. It's just so light and dum-de-dum-dum. Franz is very naive and comes in and tries to make his way and ends up with a distant relative helping him run his tobacco shop in Vienna. And again, it's interesting. This is what's happening, but as a reader, this is happening in the 1930s in Vienna. And so as a reader, you kind of know that this isn't an innocent time, and this is so. And he meets Sigmund Freud, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's so kind of one of he gets messed up. He meets a girl, and she's a music hall dancer. And again, as a reader, you're kind of saying, Franz, I think she's. And turns out, yes, she's a prostitute. So he finds that out the hard way, and he seeks help. One of his main customers is Sigmund Freud, so he seeks some advice from him, and Freud admits that women are a mystery to him as well. So, but as the novel moves on, Franz slowly but surely becomes aware that these are dark times, and again the tone of the book changes, and the wording changes. It stops being a fairy tale and starts to become deeper and darker, and it's again the craft of the writer. It's their word choices change, their sentence structures change. These are things that unless you're aware of it, you don't have to be aware of it. You don't have to think about these things, but this is what writers are doing, and it deepens the experience of a book. So the kinds of books that I certainly take to when the authors put that kind of work into it. Have a story, but there's always that underlying sort of a way they're able to bring together the sentences, the story, the characters, and develop them is what really makes the book, I think, without realizing it. I think so, yeah. I mean, what happens next can be important, although I read books where that's almost beside the point too. But a book that has to grab you on the first page and pull you through, okay, that's plot and that's entertaining and so on, but I tend away from those books for the most part, and I love the books that have that combination of I'm just as interested in what happens next, but there's all these other things going on. Just as an aside question, how many books do you read a week? Do you even keep track? No, I don't. As many as I can is what it comes down to. What, like 5 to 10 to? Not quite that many. Maybe three. Three books. I have to admit, I don't get to the end of all of them. I try to get to the end of novels. I still have trouble stopping reading a novel, but nonfiction, I don't always get to the end of them. I have to say, I always want to read enough of them that I can speak about them. But at the same time, as a reader, I've always had a source for what I'm going to read next. So I have some trusted review sites, newspaper or publications, trusted readers in my circle, things like that. So I always feel like the books I'm recommending are coming from that list, and that's a list that I've been refining for 20 years, the sources of them. So so I don't usually latch on to bad books, but every once in a while. That's good for you too. Well, I look forward to next month when we're going to be chatting about the some October releases and some other ones from the bookseller. And I'm in conversation with Chris Hull. He's the co-owner of McNally Robinson Booksellers. Today we're launching a brand new segment, which is called What to Read. And we're featuring books from the bookseller at McNally Robinson Booksellers. So, Chris, it's been a pleasure to see you again, have you in the
thanks,
studio.
Michael.
We'll get back again in October, the first Friday in October at 8:30.